Cardiff, capital of Wales, the jewel of our green country, the city where I grew up, which, by saying that, has probably lowered the current market value, and the reference to it being a jewel is now likened to something partially covered in dirt and slightly smelling of cat piss. But besides that, I am very proud to be part of a city where there is so much history. For the past few months, I've been dragging my hefty carcass around many of the shops, restaurants and pubs, not to mention the castle and museum, to find as many stories as I can. This pursuit is still ongoing. I have found a great many stories from a huge number of places, as well as a couple of strange stories of my own to throw in the mix. I will tie these in, as I usually do, with some of the history in the area, and a couple of the darker stories. First off, as usual, let me bump my gums about the history in my usual non-history channel way. Cardiff started off as a rural settlement a couple of thousand years ago, until a batch of geezers turned up from Italy called the Romans. These tanned brutes slapped the locals in irons, put them to work, and quickly established the small town of Cardiff. Caer, meaning fort or stronghold, and Diff, referring to the river. The settlement consisted of a large outer wall and an inner basilica, much like you see in this artist's depiction. Part of the existing Roman wall is still visible both in the castle and at several points on the outside. If you want to get an experience of what these walls were like, I'd recommend visiting the Roman town of Caer near Cardiff, as the remains of the walls, basilica and hypocaust are still visible. Anyway, back to Cardiff. The Romans buggered off in 407 AD, and the town walls fell into disrepair until 1091 with the invasion of the Normans. The town grew in size and eventually became a pirate-infested port during the Elizabethan period. If you've been down to the city centre on a Saturday night, you'll probably think that not much has changed. The earliest known map of Cardiff was drawn up by John Speed in 1610. You can see that on the screen now. The Tudor-era houses that you see in front of the castle were still standing during the 1800s, and one or two of the buildings are still there until this day, but on the opposite side of the road. The area surrounding the castle and St Mary Street has a dark history. From the original Cardiff jail, where hangings were conducted until 1877 when the jail closed and became Cardiff Indoor Market, to the hidden church within the famous Howells shopping centre. From the cholera outbreak that saw the deaths of hundreds, to the torture and mistreatment of prisoners in the Black Tower. This is going to be a two-part episode, with the first part focusing on the darker history of Cardiff. The second will be the stories that I've come across and how they tie into the history. First off, as previously stated, Cardiff really started to thrive from the Tudor period onwards. During the Tudor period, mammoth changes were erupting around the country through religious reform, mainly because of a certain hefty wench on the throne wanted to marry his second queen. This caused a great deal of tension within the population between those who wanted religious change, believing that the churches, monasteries and friaries were becoming greedy buildings of sin, and those who believed that King Henry had no right to declare himself head of the church ahead of the Pope in Rome. Up and down Britain, the outspoken against the king were rounded up by the local authorities and forced to convert or suffer the consequences. In 1547, Henry snuffed it. His son Edward took over the throne, but died at the age of 13. The next in line was Henry's eldest daughter, Mary I, also known as Bloody Mary. Mary, a staunch Catholic, vowed to turn Henry's Protestant Reformation around and drag Britain, kicking and screaming, back to Rome. and she aimed to do this with brutal methods. In Cardiff, the church did an about-turn and went straight back to Catholicism, but many citizens remained openly Protestant. One example of that is Rolling White. Rolling White was a poor fisherman in Cardiff. He was married with children and, as was much of the population at the time, profoundly illiterate. During the Reformation, one of the big changes that Henry had introduced was to release the Bible in English. Up until then, members of the congregation relied on interpretation of the Bible being described to them by the clergy, since the Bible was in Latin. Despite his illiteracy, Roland had learned passages from the Bible by having his son read them to him in English. Being openly Protestant, he was swiftly arrested and imprisoned in Chepstow Castle and within the Black Tower at Cardiff Castle. He was begged by both his family, friends, and the Bishop of Llandaff to repent and convert back to Catholicism. Roland refused, and during March of 1555 was burned alive in front of onlookers and his family in front of Bethany Church in the centre of Cardiff. This church is still standing to this day, but was only recently rediscovered when Howell's shopping centre closed its doors. The building had been constructed around it, and as a result, many strange ghostly occurrences happened within the walls, which will be covered in the second part of this episode. Prosperity in Cardiff continued to increase and then exploded in the 1800s with the Industrial Revolution. Cardiff became the biggest exporter of coal in the world, but with great wealth came great poverty. The gap between the haves and have-nots grew at an astronomical rate. Characters such as Lord Bute, who created fantastic structures such as the Castle Coch and the stately home within Cardiff Castle, or James Howell, who built Howell's department store, gained immense wealth. But for the average Joe on the streets of Cardiff, life was tough. The sanitation in the town was in a deplorable state, and due to overcrowding, the cesspits overflowed. It's all shits and giggles until someone giggles and shits, I guess. Disease was inevitable, and in 1849, a cholera outbreak caused the deaths of nearly 400 people. Cholera, for those who don't know, is a highly virulent disease that attacks the small intestine. It is caused by eating and drinking in unsanitary conditions. Unfortunately, the effects of cholera were extreme diarrhea, but without a cesspit to go and explode in, this would only add to the ever-growing issue. Many of the victims were buried within Llandaff Cathedral graveyard, where a great many strange occurrences have happened since. I will be conducting another charity ghost walk around that area in the near future. If you'd be interested in that, please leave a comment down below. Due to the living conditions, as well as working conditions, immigration from Ireland, and rampant crime, there were a great many riots during the 1800s. In 1831, a riot broke out in Merthyr, where the house of a clerk at the Court of Requests was broken into and his furniture damaged or destroyed. This saw the military brought in to keep the peace, but several more instances occurred, including a shooting in a pub and the illegal seizing of munitions travelling from Brecon. Several arrests were made, but one arrest stands out. Richard Lewis, also known as Dick Penderyn, a miner in the area, was arrested and brought to Cardiff. There was little in the way of evidence to say that he was involved in the destruction of the furniture or the shooting in the pub, other than being seen in the crowd during the initial uprising. He was sentenced to be executed at Cardiff Jail on the 31st of July. Despite a petition consisting of 11,000 signatures, the execution went ahead and Richard was hung in the jail on the 13th of August 1831. As I said earlier in the episode, Cardiff Jail no longer exists, and in its place, Cardiff Market now stands. I will leave it there for the moment, but in the next episode, I'll be discussing the strange sightings from the Howell Shopping Centre, the castle, the market, Geek Retreat, the Rummer Tavern, and a couple of strange events that I struggle to explain. Thank you to all my new subscribers, and welcome to my weird little channel and my sporadic uploading. Thank you for all your support, and I'll see you in the next episode. That's all from us here at Dark Entertainment. We hope that you've enjoyed the episode. If you did, then please hit the thumbs up button as it helps the channel out massively. Subscribe and hit the bell icon. If you wish to contact me, you can find me on X or on Facebook. Or if you have a story that you'd like me to cover, a location that you'd like me to investigate, or know of any ghostly goings on, you can email me at dark_entertainment@outlook.com. And remember, stay dark, stay creepy, and always laugh. Ta-ta!